Hey guys, I am putting this video out as a quick answer to refined edge. And quick is a relative term here. I guess it's quick in the sense it's going to be shorter than one of my 35-minute shave videos. But we're going to cover a few things, and this little answer to him that I'm throwing together at a moment's notice could actually help a bunch of other people, because his problem is one that I've definitely heard about before, where he said he spent 30 seconds loading his soap. As I'm trying to read, my light there is shining my eyes to give you guys better light, but it's also keeping me from reading the screen. He had a fairly soft soap loaded for 30 seconds, and it seemed like he still didn't have enough soap to do the job. Well, what are some things that could be affecting that? Let's talk about those, because I really do think it could be a very helpful video for some folks out there. Don't know quite what to call it yet. Maybe brush loading, troubleshooting, or something like that. And I made some visual aids here and here. So here are some things that can help, or some questions to ask. Is it a quality soap? Is the brush too wet? Is the brush too dry as you're doing your loading? Also, the soap age, what I'll call the tip travel, we'll get into that. The soap shape, and also the soap movement. We can look into those in more detail with my highly sophisticated visual aids there. So the first thing, the quality of the soap. There are definitely soaps out there that don't lather all that well. And you can often find out which ones those are by doing searches, or at least if you have one that's not lathering well, you can do a search on it. And often you'll see people say, yeah, I have a problem with that one. And oh man, yeah, I just gave up on that. I switched to such and such, or I've been using these other four ever since then, and I have no problem at all. And so sometimes there's that. Now, Refined Edge, I'm guessing he's probably got a quality soap. I think I know enough about him as a user to think that he's probably not latched on to one of these that is a poor quality soap. One time I bought a shaving soap from a small company at a local festival. It's had this great laurel and sandalwood scent to it. But I think she was coming at it in terms of a skincare point of view, with all kinds of butters and stuff inside of it, and not at a shaving soap point of view, because it was a pain to lather, to try to get a good lather out of it. Smelled great, had a great ingredients list, but I don't think she quite knew enough to have that be a good lathering soap. And so there may be some other folks like that out there. So if you've got a good quality soaps like Sterling, Barrister and Mann, Holy Cow, Noble Otter, Chiseled Face, Cella's pretty good, D.R. Harris, so to get some European ones out there. Cyril Salter is a hard soap that's good out there. Tabac and Mitchell's Wool Fat lather wonderfully. Spearhead is a new one that's come out lately that is a really nice performing soap. Declaration Grooming, Zingari Man. There are tons out there. Mike's Natural, Mystic Water. There are tons. So make sure you have a good quality soap. Search on reviews and things like that to make sure. Second thing, is your brush too wet? I have definitely had the case, and specifically I had the case with a boar brush and Chiseled Face soap, it's not a top tier, at least the old version. They've come out with a new version, I think in late 2019 or early 2020. They call it the Silk Tallow, and that is a top tier soap. But even their other one was nice. It just wasn't quite top tier yet. And the brush was too wet, and somehow as I was loading, that amount of water kept the bristles from really stirring up and gathering the soap. So your brush can be too wet, so wet that it gets in your way. Number 3, is your brush too dry? With a dry brush, there are videos online that have a dry brush loading method. And so you could just keep working at it, get that paste going, keep it kind of dry and still get an effective load. But I often don't do that. If I'm getting halfway through the load, like maybe 15 seconds into it, and it's not bubbling up very much in the tub, it's still looking kind of dry. You can even feel some drag, feeling a little too pasty, more pasty than maybe it should be. Then I'll just sprinkle a little bit of water in the tub and keep going. And that usually wakes it up, because that's not going to be too much water. That wakes it up and lets that brush really start pulling water, pulling soap up into itself. And so sometimes that's a fix. Obviously, if the brush is too wet, then maybe you need to shake the brush out a little bit more after you rinse it. Easy fix for too wet of a brush. I always go with a lightly wet brush. I could go with a little bit wetter than that, but it doesn't help me calculate the water quite as much so that I can report how much water I'm using. But a shortcut method I've always advocated is, shake out some water, but not tons. Okay, so that covers, and those three, good quality soap. Make sure your brush is not too wet. Make sure your brush is not too dry. And then 30 seconds a lot of times is going to be a good amount. There will be some soaps maybe you'll need to go further on, but there are other soaps where you go 30 seconds and you've got 6 or 7 passes of lather, a lot more than you really need. Of course, in troubleshooting, you can always just vary it totally. Load 3 times as long as you're currently loading. Try that. And then once you find something good, then you can start slowly backing it down or changing it in small ways. But we'll talk about troubleshooting at the end. So on to the next 3. The soap age can be a factor in terms of loading. I have soaps that I have let sit for a couple of years, and they'll load just fine, but you may have to load them for twice as long. And so if I've got an older soap that is that way, you can also sometimes tell because the soap will be pulling away from the sides of the container a little bit. Then I might double the loading time just for that purpose. But obviously, if this is a chronic problem, like maybe the Refined Edge is experiencing, then this is probably a soap that you haven't waited that long to use. And especially if it's chronic, then you're probably experiencing it with the same soap over a course of some days. And so the soap age is probably not an issue there, but I just wanted to mention it in general. And I've also heard that some people think that newer soaps can have kind of a crust on them, if you will, that you have to work away. I haven't really experienced that myself, and I've tried a ton of soaps, but there could be something to that. There could be. There are some soaps that you might want to soak beforehand. I only soak the hard soaps. I don't soak the soft ones or the medium, the Cropes. And Refined Edge is specifically talking about a fairly soft soap. So I would not advise him to soak that. Matter of fact, Saponificio Veracino does hard pucks, and they recommend you soak them in boiling water. You take a pot of boiling water and pour it over the soap and let it sit for a little while. I've never had to go that far at all, and I've had great lathers from that brand. But I guess they're trying to make it real easy and foolproof to load. Tip travel, and this is probably not usually going to be an issue, but it's worth mentioning just in case. So here I've got a soap. This is a pretty typical shaped container. Katie's Bubbles sometimes use this container. Dapper Dragon used it. This is a Talbot soap. I haven't tried it yet. I might even try it tonight. River Rouge. And this is a often used size of container. And the tubs of Sterling and others have a little bit bigger opening, and so you don't have this problem. But especially if it's a deeper tub, then what you may experience, and this is not a great brush to illustrate it with, but I'm gonna restrict the tips a little bit. As you move the brush around in, it's possible that most of the bristles stay in the center. And like I'm moving it right now on my hand, and sure, these outer bristles are moving around, but the ones right here in the center, those are staying in the same spot. And that's usually only going to happen with maybe a long bore brush or some kind of big long brush like those Omega Pro 48s, that sort of thing. But I just wanted to make that point because if I have had that happen a few times where I could look in there and my brush just wasn't traveling across the soap very much. And so you can try different things like spinning or going back and forth, anything you can do to try to change it and make those tips move around more, especially the center part. In this, along the same vein, and this is why I put it as a slash for item number 6, movement, soap shape, and movement. Tip travel, that's what we just covered. Okay, so soap shape. I have gotten a few used soaps where the center was really used up and it came up on the sides. And so it was more of a U shape. And when you put your brush down in that U shape and moved around, sometimes you wouldn't pick up quite as much soap. So in that case, what you may want to do is change the surface of the soap. Get a spoon in there and eat away, take away the side parts and then press them all down flat. That may give your brush room to really cover a bigger surface and be able to pick up the soap. So that covers the shape. And then movement, I've had a few times where I had the puck, the tub, and then the puck was smaller, maybe it was new, and so it hadn't yet affixed itself to the bottom of the thing. And so as you were loading, it would spin. If it spins, your tips aren't moving across the soap, they're pulling the soap with it. You're not going to get as much activation. You're not going to get as much disturbance to pick up the soap off of the puck. And so what I would do then, if I had a thin container, I'd just squeeze it from the outside to lock that soap puck down. Sometimes I would just stick a finger in to hold the puck still as I worked it. So make sure your soap isn't moving as you're trying to load it up. So that is that. So those are some of the things to check for, things to look out for. If none of those come to spring to your mind as, hey, that sounds like what I might need to do. If you're still kind of befuddled, one way to help yourself is to move away from the brush loading temporarily and take your 1/4 teaspoon measure. And that is an amount of soap that almost all brands that I've tried, and I've tried a ton, almost all of them, that is an amount that's good for 3 to 6 passes. There are some really efficient soaps where you'll get a ton of passes from just a 1/4 teaspoon. Holy Cow sometimes needs a rounded 1/4 teaspoon with some of their bases. Excuse me. But a 1/4 teaspoon is usually a good amount to go for. And so take that 1/4 teaspoon and dig it out of the soap. And then get your thumb in there, take it out of the spoon. So now it's on your thumb, and then press it down into the bottom of your lather bowl. If you don't lather with a bowl, if you're a face latherer, switch temporarily for a few days to do this experiment if you're having trouble with your lathers. And it can be a cereal bowl, a soup bowl. Really, it can. Yeah. Like right here. This is a soup bowl from the Dollar Tree, and it's terrific for lathering. About a 6-inch wingspan here. And it's one that I have definitely used a good many times. And so this will do just fine. And so you take that soap on your thumb and press it down into the bottom of the bowl. And if it's a soft soap, make sure you give a nice thin layer all around and don't have any soft chunks that the brush could easily dislodge right away. Press them down into the bottom of the bowl. Because if it dislodges, then the brush is scooting that chunk around instead of brushing over it and working it into the lather. Okay, And so that's important when you load a sample into the bowl. Press it down really well into a nice thin layer. And so now we know, if you've taken that 1/4 teaspoon with a good soap, we know that you've got enough product in the bowl to give yourself enough shaves. So we've eliminated that variable. Okay, then take your brush, get it pretty wet, shake some of the water out, and start working it. Add enough water until it's, you feel good about it, and then take a look at your lather. And so then, using that method, if you're able to, you should be able to then work up a good lather. And now you can see how that lather looks in the brush, how it feels for you. And then maybe that'll help you adjust your load and that sort of thing. Because now all of a sudden, if you know, hey, I've got a good lather from this soap, number one, we know it's a good quality soap. So maybe I'm not loading long enough for this particular soap. If you're using something like a really hard soap, like Mitchell's Wool Fat, Williams, those do really well if you use them each day, if they still are retaining a little bit of the moisture from the previous day. They can really make them an easy to load soap. It's just that a lot of people try it and then give up, whereas if they could get that momentum of the moisture, then it would be easy to pick up the soap the next day and the next day after that. So taking that 1/4 teaspoon, putting it in the bowl, working it with a wet brush, and you can see what happens with a good lather. You can see how big it puffs up. Does it stay low and gluey? That sort of thing. And then from that point, you can start to troubleshoot. You may want to measure how much water you're using for temporarily, just to make sure you're getting enough water in there. Refined Edge, who's posing this question, I'm sure he's got enough shaves under his belt to where I'm pretty sure he's not adding too little water. I've definitely had that happen with a person who asked a question, and I was able to help them, and we discovered he just wasn't loading nearly enough water into the lather. And when he started putting more water in, the lather just exploded in quantity, and the quality was amazing. It was slick, and he really did enjoy it quite a bit. So we were able to solve that. Now, that's probably not the same situation with Refined Edge, but I would recommend that as a last resort, to take away variables, use the 1/4 teaspoon method. If that didn't really work very much, round off that 1/4 teaspoon, take it to an extreme. Use a full teaspoon if you have to, and then add water until it's right. And then now, once you get a good lather, you can start making small changes. Or once you get a good lather with the teaspoon method, then you could switch back to loading with the brush and the tub and take it to the extreme with that as well. Load for 3 minutes and just see what happens. So those are my recommendations, and I sure hope that it helps Refined Edge, as well as perhaps the shaving community in general, whoever happens to stumble across this video. And a good lather really has been the focus, a priority on my channel. I hope to be able to really help people with their lathers. So post any questions you have. I'll get to them as often as I can. And here's hoping we help a good many people who might be struggling with their lathers. Well, I can't think of anything else. There may be a few extra tidbits. If I've left out anything big, maybe I'll record a new video at some point, and I'll put the new video link in the description at the very top so that you can shoot to that new video and get the most current information. Anyway, so I hope this helps you. Thanks for asking such a great question, Refined Edge, and good luck, and let me know how it turns out. I really would love to hear from you about that. You probably know that you have a good soap. If you have a question, feel free to post which kind of soap you're using, but I'm confident that's probably not your issue. This is Sugar Daddy Shaves, and I hope this video is going to help some people out there with their lathers, and just to experience the hobby and the pleasure of a good daily shave, or a frequent shave with not necessarily expensive ingredients, but ones that just make you feel good and enjoy your shaves, connected to the past, the rich history of guys shaving in this type of way. All right, now, you guys take care. Good night.